Good? Good. Marker?
Can you tell me about your family? What was your dad like and what was your mom like?
Oh boy. Well, Dad had 3 daughters, and Mom had 1 son when they met. And both had said they'd never marry again. Of course, they fell in love in one day. Had been together for almost 40 years when my father died. And Mother was quite brilliant. She had planned to be a lawyer. And all my father's best friends, many of them were lawyers, and they used to test her, you know. And they said, "You've got quite a brilliant lady here. She should be a lawyer." They wanted to send her back to school. And but together they brought 6 children in the world. And so we all came in kind of sets of 3s. And so it was never like the house with 10 kids. My dad was a physicist at the Howard University, and became very interested in metaphysics as well. And they were very highly regarded in their neighborhood, and helped a lot of people and raised their children with music and love. And I think they were pretty special.
What were your parents' expectation of you, and was it a given that you would work?
To be the best that I could be of whatever I was going to be. To know what I wanted, go after it, and be the best that I could be. My dad said, "No one can be better than you if you are at your best. And you're no better than anyone else. But no one else is better than you." And I always remembered that. It kept me humble, and it kept me believing in myself, in believing there is a world out there that I could conquer in my own little way, without interfering with anyone else's way, unless they got in my way. No. I say that facetiously, but I really mean it, and I mean in ways that society plans your life to tell you who you are and what you can and cannot do and what you can and cannot achieve. And I don't believe it for 1 minute. Never did. Never will. And resent what's going on now, you know. I think we're all here for one another.
Tell me the moment you realized you were good at performing.
When I was about 5. Because, as I said, I would perform for my parents, you know, and when they would settle down for the evening, and I'd learn something, you know. Of course, when I was 5, so was Shirley Temple, you know. So I'd do all of the and Mom used to do my hair in Shirley Temple curls. It was so funny, and I loved it, you know. Later, I began to write music, and I got into a performance. And then when I was 14, I was coming home from school, and Mother's out saying, "Come, quick, 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 quick." So I ran home and said, "What, Mom?" And she said, "Your dance teacher called, and they want you down at the audition. She's going to be in a big show and wants you to be in it too." It was called The College Inn Story at the Sherman Hotel in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. And so she said, "But Miss Nichols, would you do something about her hair to make her look a little older?" And I had long black hair, you know. And so Mother took my hair and pulled it up at top and made, I don't know what she did to it, and put something beautiful, pearls or something around it, and put some of her beautiful earrings, very small but very pretty. And then she put the suit on me, and she looked at me, and my big sister had given me a pair of shoes that Mother and Daddy wouldn't let me wear. They were first platforms that you've ever seen, and had ankle strap on them. And I had long, pretty legs. So Mother let me wear them for the first time, but I had to walk around the house in them, but I'd been practicing when nobody was looking anyway. And and first time that I went on the elevated by myself downtown to the Sherman Place, and I walked in, tall, and nobody recognized me in the company. And I walked over to the stage, and Ernie Byfield was sitting there, and they were all just having conversation, waiting for me. And said, she should be here any minute, And my teacher didn't recognize me. I looked so adult.
So 14, you're already working a professional job and
Yes.
going to school full
Yes,
time.
yes. I had to maintain my the average that I had at that time, which was a B plus, and so, but school came rather easy for me. Anything I was interested in was easy. So I was interested in everything. I was the only one that got good marks in science, because girls weren't supposed to like science. I thought science was fun. I was 14. We went in there about October the 1st, I think, and then December 28th, just a few days before the end of the year, I turned 15. We were there. We went in for 6 weeks, and we were there a year. And at that time, everybody who was anybody who came to town stayed there, because the big supper club where we were, the College Inn, was famous from the 20s. And Ernie Byfield was doing the College Inn story. And so someone played Fred and Adele Astaire, all the way to Katherine Dunham and her Barefoot Dancers. And they said she can't come in with her Barefoot Dancers. So he said, yes, she is. So she did one there, and she did an Apache number with heels on, It was very, very, very famous. He broke the color barrier. And the top entertainers could come and perform, like Duke Ellington, Sarah Vaughan, all of the top people, Lena Horne. They played the Chicago Theater, and they had to go on the other side of town because they couldn't, or played Ernie Byfield was the first one who played black performers in his supper club. You played the theaters, but you didn't play the supper clubs. And not only that, he was the first one that if you played at his establishment, you had a suite in the hotel, and that was the first time it ever happened. And so I had a suite. However, my parents had to be there with me. A year later, when I was almost 16, or was 16, the woman who had done the publicity for the Sherman House, for the College Inn story, called and had gotten a call from Duke Ellington, and he had come to see the show while he was in town, and he asked to meet me. And I was so excited, and Mother said, well, the guy came up to our room to say and give a note that Mr. Ellington wants to meet Miss Nichols, And Mother said to tell him he would meet Miss Nichols with her mother and the troupe. And he sent back up and said he'd be honored. And he told me, you're going to be a singer. Because I said, how do you know? Because I wanted that and everything else. And he said, because we sang in the beginning and the opening and the finale with the entire cast. And but I didn't sing in the section that we did of Katherine Dunham, of course. And I said, how do you know? And he said, because I could hear that voice of yours over everybody else's. And I did indeed wind up 6 months later traveling with him as a dancer for one of his suites. I choreographed it and played it, called Monologue, Duet, and Threesome. And I used to come to, I followed the singer, and I used to come to the edge of the stage because we were going to go right after her. And I watched her, and she was tall and willowy, and she hung onto her microphone like this. And so one day, we were almost at the end of the tour, and Mr. Ellington called me into his dressing room. And this is when he worked theaters, and so a picture would go on, and then a stage show. And he called me on, he says, sing something for me. And I looked around, I said, you can sing, can't you? And I said, of course I can sing. We all got rhythm, don't we? And he thought that was funny. And he said, well, sing something for me. And I said, well, I don't see a piano. And the picture was on, so we couldn't do it. I said, there's no piano. And he said, you don't need a piano. We can all sing. We all got rhythm, don't we? And so that was a challenge. When I finished, he said, do you still have that little gold dress you wore before we left, the party we gave before we left? And I said, oh, yes, I even have the shoes, the gold shoes. I was so dumb. And he chuckled, and he said, oh, good. He said, this number, and that one, you go on tonight. I said, what? He said, you're going to have to go on tonight. And I said, but, and he said, the band singer fell deathly ill, very, very ill, and she had to go home. So there was only a few days left. He said, you can take over. And then I thought, this is my big chance. After I got through with the chills and the nervousness. And so I went on. The great Duke Ellington is playing for me. You can't, it's like being on a cloud, floating on a cloud. You can do no wrong. And I found myself just loving it. And I looked up and I turned to Mr. Ellington, and he's trying to keep a chuckle from his face. And he finally came to me afterward. He said, you were wonderful, but please let that microphone go and be yourself. He says, she holds on to the microphone because she's so nervous. She'd fall down if she couldn't. That's why she holds on to the mic. Be yourself. And that's the best advice I ever got. You know, from then on, I said, anything I did, I knew that I had to be myself. He said, when you are yourself, nobody can touch you.
You must have run into a lot of things that you were unprepared for.
Yes, yes, yes.
Can you tell me about some of that, going out so young, at such a young age, and becoming a performer?
I remained a performer from then on. I finished the tour with Duke Ellington. I was then, it seemed, just sought after, but then I got married and had a kid, and I thought, oh, my career is over. And everybody said that, you know, oh, your career is over. And I said, no, it isn't. But I was determined to stay with my son until, not to leave him until he was at least understood, you know, not a baby.
What were some of the obstacles you faced trying to get back in your entertainment career?
Where are you going to work? And I wanted to do theater, I wanted to do plays, but there was hardly anything in Chicago. And if you're going to get anything, it would be New York, you know. And my parents weren't about to let me go at 15, 16. It's just, even though I'm married, divorced, and got a kid, you know. But there were supper clubs in downtown, and this guy saw my work and headlined me in a calypso show, which lasted for 6 weeks, lasted a year and a half, which pleased me no end because I could stay home with my son, do my work that I love to do, and he discovered I could sing, and he discovered that so when I was singing, and he advised me that the Alliance de Français was a chapter, the Chicago chapter was in the audience, so I sang La Vie en Rose, and afterwards, they all came up to me and chattering away in French, and I didn't understand a word they were saying. And when they found out that I didn't speak French, they said, "Oh, but no." And I loved that, and I knew I think is when I really knew showbiz was for me, and I love the theater. I love the theater of it. I love the live contact. And then I got into plays and so forth and went from there.
How did the job on Star Trek come about?
They hadn't sent the script and had no idea what it's about. And they said, you read the role, it was 3 characters. Somebody named Bones, somebody named Kirk, somebody named Spock. And they said, would you read the part of Spock? And I looked at it, woo, really good scene, 3 pages full of just those 3 characters. And so I read it and I said, well, tell me something about this character. What is she like? They looked at me and they said, don't you know anything about this show? And I said, no, I've been in Europe. And they said, Spock is not a she, is well, let's put it this way. Leonard Nimoy wouldn't be very happy about it. You know, could she be a woman, I said? And he said, yes, she could, but Leonard Nimoy wouldn't be very happy about it. And I said, oh, so it's cast. And I said, then why am I reading it? Because it's the closest thing possibly to your character. You're the chief communications officer. And I said, oh, okay, so what are the characteristics? And they told me, and that's how I read for it. And I took those characteristics and of no nonsense, that clean, pulled all the things apart except just what I do. And we went. He said, "You probably don't want to read the whole script. Don't you know the whole 3 years?" So we just want to get a feel. Well, I found they got to the end of the first page, the end of the second page, the end of the third page, and finished this marvelous scene, and the person is really getting into it with me too. And then they sat there and they just looked at me. Bob Justman said, "Have Penny call down when I finish. Have Penny call down." Penny was his secretary. Have Penny call down and see if Leonard Nimoy has signed his contract yet. And that was their pleasant way of telling me I had the role, not his role, but the communication. But he said, would you wait? And so I waited. They told me to wait. And she said, oh, fine, Miss Nichols. And that's a good sign, because if they're going to see all the other people, and if those who wait get to read again. So I thought that's what nobody else comes in, you know. And so I read my big book, and I curl up on a little sofa in a little ante room where she's put me, and nobody else is in there. And then Joe Sargent, who was the director on that first show episode, peeked his head in, and he's looking for somebody. He looks, he sees me. He said, what are you doing still here? And I said, you told me to wait. He said, oh, come on, big talent. You had the role when you walked in.
Now, did you take that role intentionally to be a trailblazer? I mean, you were about to be one of the few African-American women with a weekly television show as a spot every single week. Was that your intention, taking that role? Did you even think of that at the time?
It never occurred to me that it was anything except a series. and what I would be able to do with that. And I would be able to do plays, do theater, and not worry about food on the table. It didn't occur to me that there was more to it, only if it lasts long enough. And a lot of shows weren't. And I didn't know what it was about. You know, really, science fiction wasn't a big thing then, and people would go science fiction and look at you cross-eyed, you know. And much less did I realize the impact it would have on people's lives across the country and across the world and in the most unlikely places.
Tell me who you played and describe her character for me.
Uhura was an interesting character to me, and I fell in love with her. And the character was so strong that there was some concern. And so each time, almost every day, I'd get go back to I'd get the script, the full script. We'd all get the full script on the last day of shooting for the next shooting. We would rehearse it, and it would be a beautiful scene. And then they'd bring down the rewrites, and I had less to say. I didn't know where that was coming from, but somebody else was saying it, either Leonard or Bill, Spock, or the captain, or somebody. And then it kept happening. So you'd get the pink pages and the blue pages and the yellow pages and the orchid pages, and what was started out to be a beautiful participation became yes sir, no sir, I can't reach Starfleet Command, sir, you know, that kind of thing. I spoke about it, and I said it's not natural because this is the command crew.
What was the thing that made you stay? What made you decide to stay on the show?
I went respectfully, wrote out my letter of resignation, and said at the end of the evening, because they can't hold me, that I thanked him for everything that he had done, and that I'm now getting offers, and you know that my aim is Broadway. I want the theater, and I miss it, and I wish to leave the show at the end of the season. And Gene could not believe it. He just looked at me and he said, "You can't do this. Don't you know what I'm trying to achieve here? I know how you feel." And I didn't say anything, and I just was resolute and in my heart. And he said, "Okay," and I handed him, he said, "Why don't you do this? Take the weekend and think about it. Think about what we're achieving here. And if you still feel the same way on Monday, come back Monday and you can go with my blessings. I won't like it, but you'll have my blessings." And I said, "Okay, Gene, thank you." And I walked away with trepidation and a big sigh, a relief. I realized how much I had been putting up with, from the guard at the gate to the some of the other people, guy that worked in the front office. And who hated that I had the job. And so as I've said this before, as fate would have it, I went to and I had been invited as a celebrity guest to sit on the dais, and it was a fundraiser. and I believe it was NAACP fundraiser. And so I had just sat down at the desk when one of the promoters, organizers, came over and said, "Miss Nichols, there's someone who wants to meet you. He says he's your greatest fan." And I said, "Oh." And I'd seen the fan mail, some of the mail, and little kids or a grown kid, 40-year-old kid come and say, "Oh, Star Trek is so wonderful. Oh, I love you on Star Trek, you know. I love the stories. I love where it's taking us, you know, the truth of it." And so I loved it too, you know, because I saw what it was doing, but I hated what it was doing to me. And that I really couldn't enjoy being part of this because I never knew what was coming at me. So I could never plan a scene. I could never, because it would not be my scene anymore. I wouldn't be part of the scene. I was just an adjunct. I remember thinking, I don't know who there's someone who wants to meet you. He says he's your greatest fan, and I'm thinking it's a Trekker. So I said, "Oh, thank you," and I stood up and went to turn around and went to stand up, and I turned around and looked straight in the face of Dr. Martin Luther King, who was this beautiful smile on his face, walking toward me. And I thought, I don't know who that little Trekker is that wanted to meet me, but he's going to have to wait because this is my leader coming to me, and he's smiling. He introduced Dr. King to me, and I'm like, "Hello, Dr. King." And I shook his hand, and he said, "Ms. Nichols, I am the fan. I am your greatest admirer." He said, "The work you are doing, you may not know how important it is, but we who are fighting the good fight stop and watch you on Thursday night when you're on." And I was like, "What?" And he was so complimentary, and yet he was serious with me. He said, the times, you know, are such that anything that encourages us to do that which we know is right. When we are out there, we know that Uhura is there. The 23rd century tells us we are the beginning, and that is where we're going. Television is one of the greatest teachers. People look on television. They used to say, "I know it's true because I read it in the newspaper." But now they look on TV and they know it's true because it's there. This man, Gene Roddenberry, has created much more than probably, I wonder if he knows. And I said, "I think he does, you know." And I said, "Thank you so much, Dr. King. It means so much to me, and I am going to miss my co-stars because they're," and he says, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I'm leaving the show because I have an offer to," and that's as far as I got. He said, "You cannot do that." This man, Gene Roddenberry, has changed the face of television forever unless you leave. He said, you are the chief communications officer on a 5-year mission. What does that tell us? If you leave, what, you were a flake? That kind of, he didn't actually use that word, but he meant that. He said, Uhura is more than just a communications officer. You're a symbol. Young people look at you and they understand. You're part of them. You have created this role in such a manner, with such dignity and such beauty. And humor when you're off the ship, when you're off work, off the command crew. He says, but you're on the command crew. You're one of the command. Where are you going? He said, you cannot do this. You have a greater good This is a greater good. And he says, then he lectured me some more, and then he says, and besides, you are the only one, Star Trek is the only show that my wife Coretta and I allow our little children to stay up late and watch, and you are their hero. And I laughed. Dr. King, his children, and somebody else is a hero. He's my leader, you know. And he said I could not go, and all I could think of the next 2 days was what he had said. He says, you've created this character with intelligence and beauty and compassion. You belong here. Besides, you're fourth in command. Now, that was the first time I heard I was fourth in command. So I go back to Gene Roddenberry Monday morning, and I said, Gene, and I tell him what transpired, and I tell him what Dr. King has said. And I said, if you still want me to stay, I will. It made such sense, and I know what you are trying to do. And Gene took a big sigh, and he said, God bless Dr. Martin Luther King. You're right, somebody knows what I'm trying to achieve here. And he reached in his drawer, and he pulled out the letter of resignation, and he handed it to me. It was in 1,000 pieces. And I looked at him, and there was a tear coming down that big, strong face of his. He said, God bless Dr. Martin Luther King. Somebody knows what I'm doing.
Can you talk a little bit about one of the quintessential scenes, which was the kiss between Uhura and Captain Kirk?
Whew. There was a scene that was, I guess, changed the face of television forever. It was a scene in which, for the first time, one of the first times I got to get off the bridge. And it was what would become the first interracial kiss. We were being forced by these people who had tremendous kinetic powers and could force people to do their bidding. And they decided to have us entertain them, and with a love scene. And the scene culminated in them forcing Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura to kiss. Now, if it had been any other actress than a black actress, it would have been just a scene. But it stirred so much controversy in the studio. The director stopped us. The script plainly says he's in her arm and she's nervous, she's fighting it, they're trying to fight it, and they come together and they kiss. So Bill Shatner was just delighted. He said, I knew I'd get you in my arms one day. And we're laughing. I said, oh, shut up. So the director stops and he says, Bill, what are you doing? He said, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm kissing Lieutenant Uhura. They're forcing me to. And he says, but Bill, and he comes up to Bill, and he's talking to Bill in his eyes like I'm not there. Bill was very angry about it. So they called Gene Roddenberry, and two suits from NBC. And the suits are standing over there, and Gene comes in, what's the matter? And he said, well, this is what was up, and he's there, and they actually kissed. And Gene said, yes, but what's the matter? And he said, Gene, this is going into the South. You know, we can't like this, blah, 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 blah. And Gene said, oh, I see. But what's the matter? And he said, what do you suggest? He said, well, you can take her in arms and then they don't kiss. He says, but I mean, am I the only one who's not crazy? And so Gene said, I see your point. Shoot it both ways. And the guy said, phew, okay. Bill, where's Nichelle? I was standing right there, and I walked over and got to my place. And he said, now, we'll shoot it both ways. So Bill said, fine, can I shoot the one with the kiss first? And so we did 6 takes or 8 takes. And then he finally said, Bill, we've got 3 more minutes to left, because Bill kept saying, it doesn't feel right. I think maybe I'm holding her. Are you getting a good shot? Maybe I can just, And we did the kiss. He said, could I get the one? He says, oh, of course. Why didn't you say something? So now this guy crosses his eyes. He walks back over, and he says, and action. And he's finally going to get the one without the kiss. He is so sure he's going to get the one, he's not even looking in the camera. And Bill takes me, and instead of the kiss that we kissed like this, he takes me over like this, and he looks up in the camera and crossed his eyes. He never saw it until, and he says, and cut. And of course, I can't use the shot. That is how the first interracial kiss happened on TV.
Well, that's one story of it. In general, what was the value of Star Trek as a show? Because it was so much bigger than just a television show in some ways.
I think the value of Star Trek was it was every man. When you come, you see yourself for who you are. You can measure yourself by looking at Star Trek and measure yourself. What are you doing with your life, with others? How are you relating? Where are your prejudices? Before you put a mirror up to someone else, put it up to yourself. Because we all have wondrous qualities and strengths, and we all have weaknesses, and some of them are very ugly. And we let some of our worst traits, for one reason or other, dominate our lives. And we decide that one person is not worthy, or we can do without them. We can take away their security because mine is more important. And then you have to learn all over again.